If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. If you would like to earn continuing education credit for your FP&A certification from the Association of Finance Professionals for listening to the show, go to the show notes for details on how to earn the credit. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Today. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy. FP&A Today is brought to you by Data Rails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Parth Kalunari. Parth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Paul.
Yeah, really excited to have you here with us. Let me just give a little bit about his background. He's coming to us from the Bay Area, San Jose, California. He's currently a director of finance at Adobe, and he studied engineering for his undergrad and business analytics for his MBA. So we're really excited to have him, has a great background. Why don't we start? We're going to start with a fun question, then we'll ask you to tell our audience about the background. So what has been the most challenging budgeting forecast experience you've had in your career?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Paul. I think when I think about the most challenging experience, I see it a little bit differently. And in the past decade or so, every year in every role that I've been in, I think has kind of thrown unique challenges my way. And frankly, That's what I've really enjoyed. Whether it was my time in the e-commerce space, in the merchandising and the shipping businesses, or in the ever changing, the SaaS and the technology space, where I was in the role of cloud finance or cloud finance or business finance. I think each one of them has its own, tough spots, right? And it was challenging or exciting from things like changes in the industry or macro trends or the uncertainties that were introduced by the recent pandemic, or the technology disruptions that happens every now and then, or the competitive pressures that you start seeing from your competitors. I think or the shifts in how the customers behave. I think there is so much change that happens over a period of time, and you have to incorporate that into your planning and budgeting exercise, which I think makes it a super, super interesting. And I'll just, kind of maybe share one example, right? In one of the roles I was in previously, when I was in the shipping FP&A team, I got to manage the P&L for a shipping labels business from a finance perspective, right? And if you imagine, this job was almost at like the intersection of a marketplace economy, complex supply chains, which could be completely messed up by geopolitical disruptions. Working with all the logistics vendors out there and negotiating the contracts, and of course, online shopping and e-commerce. And then, of course, it also used to involve, financial forecasting around all of these different parameters. So you can imagine a job like that, which is at the intersection of so many different things. It was a challenge from a planning and budgeting perspective, but it was really, really, really exciting.
Thank you. And it sounds like you definitely have had some different challenges, complexity and different things for those budgeting experiences. So appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? Just tell us a little bit more of how you ended up where you're at and, kind of that journey from engineering to FP&A.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, as you mentioned, I did my undergrad in engineering. So I'm a Bachelor of Technology in Instrumentation and Controls Engineering. And while I was doing that, while I really benefited from the experience of having an undergrad in engineering, whether it was like the problem solving or the structured thinking or the analytical skill sets that I was able to kind of develop during this time, I did feel that I wanted to kind of explore opportunities that aren't really kind of or necessarily related to core engineering, right? I was inclined more towards roles that are business facing, client facing, but related to technology. And I knew I was good at quant. So I believed that I could make use of these skills, in such type of roles where it was like a combination of technology and business. And back then, I honestly kind of didn't know about the FP&A function, and it even existed. So I wasn't aware about it at all. And after I finished my engineering, it kind of happened just organically that I got campus placement in a decision sciences consulting firm, which is headquartered in Chicago and had offshore operations out of Bangalore, India. Right. Uh, so what I did not fully kind of know at that time what decision sciences was. I really liked the pitch that this company made to the students, right, which is about data-driven decision making and helping your clients kind of drive the business based on the insights that you're going to provide. So I really liked that kind of a pitch, and I joined this company, and I was there for about 2 years working in this company, and that was my introduction in the space of business analytics, decision science, pure play analytics. So that's how I kind of started my career. When I was at this company, after 2 years or so, I decided I wanted to take it, to the next level. I wanted to kind of pursue masters in business analytics, and that's when I really moved to the US. Back in 2013,
Hmm.
2014, and fast forward. After I completed my masters, I joined eBay, and I actually interned with them as well, during the summer. And then I was fortunate enough to kind of get a return offer in at eBay, and I was there for about 4 years. Did a variety of different roles. Was always a part of the finance and analytics organization, and that's where I was really introduced to FP&A, right? Just so did a bunch of variety of different roles in FP&A, whether it be from a product and technology perspective,
Hmm.
or from a business FP&A standpoint, or from a strategic finance perspective. Investments and new business opportunity assessment. So a lot of the FP&A kind of work started happening really when I was at eBay. And in 2019, then I moved to Adobe and have been here since then. Have really enjoyed my time working with a great set of folks that I get to work with. And have been able to work on some really cool stuff here as well. So I've been a part of the consolidations FP&A team, have been a part of the corp FP&A team, cloud finance, and currently I'm playing more like the strategic finance and the business FP&A role. So to get back to the question that you asked, Paul, I think it's my journey has been a dynamic one, which early on included like a shift from engineering to finance, and then kind of a gradual progression from analytics to FP&A. But it's been an exciting one.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that background. And, because I have a follow up question here for you. You hinted at it a little bit, but you earned your undergrad in engineering, but never
Yeah,
worked in engineering. You
right.
started your career in analytics. So help me understand a little bit of the thought process, because from our conversations we had, you never really, at least toward the end of schooling, never planned on working in engineering. So
Right.
why kind of finish a degree, and what was the thinking there?
Yeah. Absolutely. So as I kind of mentioned earlier in the in the prior segment, uh, one of the primary motivations behind why I decided to pursue an undergrad in engineering was because I've always kind of had a liking towards maths and science, right? And that was the reason. And when I say I had a liking for science, it was just the different kind of the fundamental branches of science like physics, chem, or biology. And not just the fundamental branches, but actually the scientific method of thinking that goes behind engineering, right? Which is basically like a very engineering trains you to think in a very structured and hypothesis driven way of trying to solve a problem at hand, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what really kind of got me into the engineering space to begin with. uh, but while I was going through my coursework, what I was quickly realizing is I was gravitating towards courses that involved analyzing data or economics or decision making. So I started taking elective courses in economics and statistics, and I really started to like what I was learning. Right, so I could see myself applying this knowledge in the real world. Right, so during my fourth and final year of undergrad, when I started applying for jobs, I was keeping a lookout for jobs that are more business and management or economics related, and that's when I stumbled upon analytics or decision sciences, right, and as a field, and I really liked it. So I think I could see the connection between my quant skill sets and its application to the real world coming true. Via the field that I'm in right now, which is analytics and finance, and that's why I decided to pursue that. Uh, So I would say the transition from engineering to analytics was based on the same foundation that I joined engineering with, which is leveraging quant, leveraging problem solving skills that you learn in engineering, but applying them to a field that gives you a lot more exposure, to business and technology, which is what I like doing. So that's how I would kind of think about why engineering and why the transition to finance and analytics made sense in my mind.
Thank you. I appreciate you walking through that. And that makes a lot of sense, which kind of leads me to our next question. So, you spent several years as a data analyst, decision
Yeah.
support. You earned your MBA in analytics. So, talk a little bit more about how having that background helps you as an FP&A professional. You've kind of made that shift a
Yeah.
little bit more
Yeah.
to FP&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think for to start with, the A in the FP&A is analysis, right? So it's related
Sure.
to analytics. So exploring a career in FP&A after having worked in analytics and decision sciences for a few years was I think in my mind a great option, or is a great option for all the analytics professionals or the decision scientists out there. And one which I believe felt extremely seamless, at least for me, right? Than what I originally imagined. Because when I was making this transition, I had this going in the back of my mind on, hey, I'm not from core finance. I've not earned my accounting degree. How am I really going to fit within the finance space? And this was a couple of years back, right? But when I moved into the FP&A space, like I almost felt at home, right? Because it's a lot. It is basically what you're doing is you are kind of doing pure play analytics, but you're doing it for a different kind of a construct, wherein you're in the you're leading kind of the budgeting and planning processes. You're doing a lot of strategic finance, which has a huge component of analytics involved in it, right? So while there are challenges, of course, when you make a career transition from one field to the other, that is slightly different in its scope, I think it can definitely be achieved. But to be honest, I had to spend a lot of time building my core finance skills as well, because that definitely was something that I had to kind of build and develop, because I didn't originally come from that space, right? So I took online courses, whether it be in basic accounting, fundamentals of corporate finance, and I continue to do that even today, to be honest, to kind of continue to expand my knowledge and understanding of the domain. But on the other hand, I think what helped me was having this really strong foundation in data analysis and problem solving. So I could see the two kind of coming together and helping me kind of become a decently successful FP&A professional, right? And I believe that there are five pillars to kind of become a successful FP&A professional. Like that's what I've kind of learned over the last decade or so. I think the first one is having a strong business acumen. The second one is having a good intuition about the data that you're looking at, right? The third one is, I think, being able to tell a great story. The fourth, of course, is having the right skill sets, whether from a finance or from a technology perspective. And then the last one, I think, is business partnering. If someone has spent a reasonable amount of time in the field of analytics and decision science, it's more likely than not that you would have great exposure to at least four out of these five pillars, maybe except for the core finance skills, right? So given the huge overlap between what makes a successful FP&A professional and what makes a successful analytics professional, I think it is a very natural, or it's a very organic transition that one can have going from pure play analytics into FP&A. And hence I think that's how I think about my transition, and hopefully that kind of sheds some light on the question that you asked as well.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And it makes sense to me. There is a lot of overlap between the two,
Yeah.
like you mentioned. FP&A, you'll see more and more, many CFOs put analytics under finance
Yep.
in companies,
Yep.
right? It's rolling up to the CFO. At a minimum, they should be working closely together. And there are definitely areas where the roles intertwine and overlap. Like you mentioned, storytelling,
Yep.
huge
Exactly.
one.
Yep.
Visualizing data, all those things are really needed. There's a reason they're both analyst type roles. You know what it is like. 13 different spreadsheets emailed out to 23 different budget holders. Multiple iterations, version control, errors, back and forth updates. You never really feel in control of the consolidation and collection process. Yep, I've been there. Stop, breathe. DataRels is the financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. DataRels takes data from all your company's disparate sources. No organization is too complex, consolidating everything into one place, secured in the cloud. Now all your data finally talking to each other. Everything is automated back into your report in Excel. Cash flow, FX conversion, intercompany transactions, now automated and up to date. Drill down and variance analysis in seconds. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Turn your Excel into a lean, mean FP&A machine. Find out more at www.datarels.com. What I want to ask you next is, prior to the episode, you and I have had the opportunity to chat. And I remember specifically you mentioning that in your view, finance has a more solid seat at the table from kind of your experiences and things you've seen. Why is that? Talk about that perspective.
Absolutely. And I think the way that I would answer that question, Paul, is kind of reflecting back on the thought process I had playing in my mind when I went through the transition myself, right? If we start by just, understanding the two functions, finance or FP&A and analytics, while there are a lot of, I would say, commonalities between the two, like the ones we discussed previously, I think there are some differences and some really critical differences between the roles, between the role of these functions, in any organization. And, of course, there are caveats and exceptions to what I'm going to what I, to the opinion that I'm going to share. But generally speaking, I think finance is more what I think of as a core business function.
Don't worry, we'll put a label on the episode that says, this is Parth's opinion, subject to dispute.
Exactly. Thank you. But what I think is finance is more what I think of as a core business function, right? Meaning every organization, whether a startup or an established organization, would have some form of finance function existing within the organization, right? Even for startups, as soon as they have had some sort of a product market fit, and they have witnessed a good, kind of a reception amongst their customer base, they begin to march towards, growth and expansion. And that almost naturally kind of requires starting to build out a finance function. It might just be an accounting function at the start, but you do see a finance team taking shape, right? Analytics as a standalone function, I do feel is still a kind of a luxury that some companies do and some companies don't seem to be able to afford. I think that's the number one key difference. The second one, I think, is the more I see how these fields are evolving, data analysis and data-driven decision making, skills and scope, which were, kind of historically something that only the pure analysts or the pure play analytics or analytics professionals used to have these skill set, and they used to be tasked with that as their primary role within the organization, right? But the more I see that, it's now becoming like a core skill set across all the functions, and particularly even in the finance function, right? So that's, I think, the second reason why I think that finance, now that it has this core skill set of, analytics and data-driven decision making, is almost doing the job to a certain extent of what a business analytics function would do, right? As a standalone function. The third reason why I feel that, finance has a core seat at the table is, again, particularly the FP&A and the strategic finance unit, they play a very active role in, being the drivers and the influencers of any strategic decision making that happens in the organization, right? So whether it be P&L management, operating plans, rolling plans, financial planning, investment planning, new business, opportunity assessments, you name it, trying to balance, growth and profitability for the organization. Finance usually takes the driver's seat across these work streams, right? And analytics, on the other hand, are critical parts of that puzzle, but they usually have a more contained role and scope of how they get involved in those work streams. And I think the primary reason for this is the stakeholder exposure and management that finance gets as part of their role is very different than what analytics functions get as a part of their role, right? And lastly, you spoke about how the teams kind of roll up within the CFO's organization. So although the chain of leadership and the reporting structure shouldn't really matter in any organization, the reality is that finance has a C-suite representation, right, across every organization. And as you can imagine, having the C-suite representation brings a lot of credibility, a lot of expertise in business and finance operations and decision-making process. While on the other hand, the analytics function sometimes reports in the product team, sometimes in the business team, sometimes in the technology team, and sometimes even in the finance team, depending on the scope and mandate, that they are tasked with. So some of these and a lot more reasons is why I think both functions are great, by the way. I came from analytics, so I love that function. But I think that's some of the reasons which I shared is what makes finance have a little more a solid seat at the table than just a pure play analytics function would.
Thank you. I appreciate that thorough explanation there. And I think what you said makes sense. I can see what you're saying, which kind of leads to my next question, right? It's clear in your career you felt like you've had a seat at the table in different roles. But what would be the advice you'd offer to an FP&A professional that, feels like they don't have a seat at the table, like they need to earn it? Any advice you'd offer them around maybe things they should be doing or how to go about making sure they get that seat at the table?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And I think, as I mentioned before, I think the role of FP&A in today's context is something we need to kind of better understand to be able to answer that question, right? If we take a step back and just think through some of the macro trends that we're living in, I think there are some distinct trends that we see developing, right? One, from a macro perspective, we do see the business landscape kind of changing quite significantly, right? So businesses are becoming more globalized, they're becoming more digitally connected, and you see these advancements and market disruptions happening at an extremely rapid pace that we haven't seen before, right? So there's an increased sense of competition and industries are facing. So every organization is now trying to kind of drive strategic growth, but also trying to be really operationally efficient at the same time, right? There is a rapid pace, of technology innovation, Chat GPT and conversational AI. You can hear these kind of technology disruptions happening all the time, right? So there is an abundance of this data that is being created and stored, which if we think about it, is leading all companies to be wanting to become better at data driven and agile decision making. So now that we've kind of spoken about like the context of the macro environment, let's understand what this means for FP&A, right? Because companies are looking for FP&A professionals who I think possess a combination of three skills. One, analytical, because that's a core part of the job. Second, technical, because given the increased amount of data that exists in companies, and one just has to be technologically, I think, proficient to be able to be successful in this kind of a role. And the third one, of course, is the finance skills, right? So every organization is looking for an FP&A professional who can play like a strategic role instead of just an operational role, and the silos that probably existed before, uh, you know, uh, are kind of are collapsing, right? And including finance functions, every function is now needing to be more collaborative, and the kind of output that is being expected out of the FP&A team is more predictive in nature than just being descriptive or kind of look back kind of output, right? So there is a greater than ever before stress on FP&A delivering the
Mm-hmm.
impact and insights versus
Sure.
just reporting, right? So coming back to your question on what an FP&A professional needs to do to earn a seat at the table if they don't have one, is to maybe reflect on how they are supporting the vision mission, um, you know, of the company that they're in, and where the company is heading towards, and how can they help the organization through their work, right? I believe that FP&A does have a seat at the table, but it's just that the FP&A professionals need to own the outcome of the contributions that they are making to the organization as well.
I really like the last part there that you said. That really stuck with me as listen to that is you're right, owning the outcome. We have a responsibility there. And that's really important to look at and to do that self-assessment and figure out why it's not
Right,
happening and what you need to change. Because the role, if done properly, and I'd say in some companies it's still viewed a little bit more of as a reporting role. But if the role is structured properly, by the nature of the role, you should have a seat at the table. So you need to ask yourself, why don't I have that? Is it
right,
the company isn't structured right?
right,
And if it's not going to change and you want a seat at the table, then you probably need to go find another job. And if
Absolutely.
it is
Yeah.
structured in such a way that you have the function has a seat at the table, then what do you need to change that you're not doing so you don't have a seat at the table?
Exactly. Absolutely. That's exactly right, Paul.
No, it makes sense to me. And so it really comes, you got to figure out what company are you in? Are you in company A or company B? And then from there, you got to figure out what's the role I want to have and how does that fit and make your decision. Because I've been in some companies where there wasn't an appetite to make that change to really give FP&A a seat at the table. And right, I've seen some roles where that's the case. And it's
Right.
like, all right,
Right.
well, I could be doing great analysis and pushing and making a difference in some ways, but if they don't want me there, I'm limited, right? There's only so
Yeah.
much you can do as an individual.
And that's absolutely right, Paul, because I have seen those kind of examples as well, right? Like I have seen it all depends on what is the role of the FP&A team in the organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Are we just talking about an FP&A team, but which is not really FP&A, but which is like a reporting function? Or are we
Yep.
really talking about an FP&A team that has a more strategic role in the organization, right, and not just an operational role? I think if
Yep.
you're working in an organization which has an FP&A team that has that strategic role, and the organization acknowledges the value that FP&A team can drive through the insights that it can deliver, I think then you're at a great place, right? And you can do,
Yep.
you can contribute a lot to the growth of the company through your work.
Agree.
Unfortunately, as you mentioned, there are a lot of companies out there which still look at finance as purely a reporting function, right? They're just looking for the quarter close reports or the month end reports. So they're looking only for that kind of support from their finance teams. There, I definitely do feel that it's going to be a lot more kind of limiting to how much value you can add through your work. I mean, of course, all of the things that I mentioned about quarter close and month-end reporting is absolutely critical to what we do as a finance team, right? But there is something that
Yep.
goes beyond that operational, kind of responsibilities to playing like a strategic, to being able to add strategic value to the business. And if the company that you're in is ready to embrace that, you're in a great place.
Totally agree. And one way I really like to think of about is I'll say if you're in the first one where the focus is reporting and they don't want strategic, you're doing FP&R, financial planning and
that,
reporting.
that, that's right.
If you want to do FP&A, go find a different organization because the analysis part, at least for me and for many people, that's where the strategy takes place. That's where a
Absolutely.
lot of the rewarding parts of the job take place. Not to say they can't come in the planning phase, and obviously they should, or even reporting. There can be some rewarding and great things from that, but it's not the holistic role if you're missing that.
That's right. And it also goes back to what you enjoy, right? I mean, there are some people who have met in my career on who really just, enjoy the reporting part, like, building
Yes.
great dashboards and reporting on the business performance. And that's fantastic because if that's what you really like, and that's what you want to be able to kind of, contribute to in terms of, your contribution to the company, I think then that's a fantastic place to be in. But
Yep.
when I think about what I, kind of as we spoke about earlier, uh, I want to be able to kind of contribute to the growth of the business through my ideas, through my, through the hypothesis that I have around the different, business problems that exist out there, right? So there you need that strategic, the company to embrace that strategic inputs from the FP&A team. Absolutely.
Yep. And like you said, there are definitely different roles. And as there's a reason I've always been business unit FP&A as much as I can in my career versus corporate FP&A. Because I want to be out there making the decisions with the business versus rolling up all the financials. Nothing wrong with rolling them up. It needs to be done. It can be a great job, just not the best fit for my personality. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm completely, you have to understand those things. So I think that's been a great conversation. Let's shift gears here a little bit. You've held several different roles in FP&A at Adobe. Today, you are leading a finance team supporting the first product led growth based product at Adobe. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of that experience, because I'm sure that's quite a journey for Adobe to be launching a product like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before we get into the details of this, I would love to maybe just make share a little bit to our listeners of the podcast and what this acronym PLG is. So it
Sure.
basically stands for product led growth, right? Which is a type of a go to market strategy that has picked up over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years ish.
Yep.
I won't go into the depth of what that is, but I would highly encourage every single FP&A and a finance and finance professionals listening into this podcast to read up on this if they don't know about this already. Uh, so coming back to the question that you asked, I currently do lead a team in lead the FP&A team for Adobe Express, which is an offering that Adobe launched at the start of 2022 and continues to build on in a significant way, right? And the way that we decided to kind of continue to optimize different parts of the customer journey that for this particular product is by adopting product-led growth as a GTM strategy, right? And what it means from an FP&A perspective is I think it was a fantastic opportunity for me and my team to kind of reimagine the way that we approached financial planning and supported the business, right?
Mhm.
Uh, so when we think about financial planning, FP&A usually has a model that forecasts, top line and expenses, and that's usually what becomes the core or the significant component of the financial planning exercise, right? And while there are always these caveats, there would always be caveats. I think FP&A models tend to focus mostly on financial metrics, right? Which we tend to forecast based on historicals. In this case, I think the reason I like this opportunity so much is we actually had we had the opportunity to adopt a completely different approach to planning and model building, right? So we took a much more, I would say, like a bottoms up approach in our modeling, starting with building forecasts and projections around every single critical upstream metric, whether it be acquisitions related or whether it be from an engagement perspective that the customer, like how are customers really engaging with the product, or what kind of conversion rates are we seeing in the product itself, or what kind of retention are we seeing for this particular product. So it was a completely, I would say, instead of purely being based on historicals and purely being based on just the trends that we see from a top line standpoint, this is a place where I got the opportunity to actually understand the customer journey, translate that into a financial model, and then build my financial planning around that. And it required a lot of cross-functional teams. We first kind of partnered with multiple different teams to define the KPIs or the key performance indicators that we believed would be critical to monitor, measure, optimize, to be able to drive like a superior customer experience. And since then, we've tried to kind of establish a relationship between the upstream metrics all the way down to how does it translate into revenue and ARR, right? Or even expense for that matter. So now all of a sudden, the FP&A team is now closely, kind of monitoring the customer success metrics as part of the core financial model, and subsequently trying to kind of forecast financials versus having it solely rely on historical data, having the financials solely rely on historical data to predict, the future scenarios. Uh, so that's been my experience, kind of supporting a PLG, led product here at Adobe.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And what I want to ask about next is just insights. I know from our conversations you love deriving insights out of data, but how do you think about that? How do you go about analyzing data to find those insights? Do you have a
Yeah,
framework or an approach that you use that helps you find insights from data? Because I think it's a challenge many of us face.
yeah, exactly. Uh, and absolutely. I think some of it goes back to what we discussed earlier as well, right? I think there are four pillars to kind of becoming an effective, FP&A professional, right? Uh, one is the business acumen, there is the intuition or the analytical skills, there is the data sources and the
Hmm.
technology aspect in that role, and there is the storytelling, right? And if I were to think of this through the lens of a framework, as you kind of asked, there is a framework that I had kind of I have used at the very start of my career. When I was working at the decision sciences organization. It is what is referred to as the SCQA framework, right? So the situation, the complications, the questions, and the answer framework, which was developed by, I forget the name of that person now, but it was basically a management consultant who was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, working with McKinsey, who developed this framework, right? which I believe can come really handy in being able to have a structure or a structured problem solving approach, right? And I won't go into too many details about what the framework is, but it provides, I would say, a logical structure for deriving insights and being able to present information, making it super easy for the audience to understand and engage with that content, right? So if we were to briefly touch on this framework or any other framework or approach like this, I think it is imperative for an analyst or FP&A professional to kind of really understand what is the business problem at hand that they're trying to solve, in the context of the current state of the business, and then gaining clarity on the complications which might have led to that problem and what questions that need to be answered through the data, through analyzing the data that can help solve this problem. So if one were to think about every business problem and every analytical problem in this form of a structured manner, and then leverage their analytical and technology skills to kind of parse trends and patterns from the data, I think it definitely could help in deriving the right insights that can enable, effective decision making.
Thank you. And just one more time, just for audience, we'll make sure you get it. Can you give us the acronym again? Was it S?
It was SCQA. So it is situation, complication, question, and answer. It's called the SCQA framework. I love that. I've used it quite a bit, in a lot of different business problems that I've worked on.
I haven't heard that one before, so I like that. So just I'm going to say it one more time for audience, just real clear, so everybody gets it. Situation, complication, question, answer. And so it's a great framework you can use. There's others out there. I've seen
Yep.
others as well, but it always helps to have a framework to help guide you, because I think we've all been there. I know I have. It's very easy to get lost in the data and go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Something to guide us back to what are we trying, if there is a time tested framework that exists out there, I think it's worth exploring, is what I've learned in my career. So definitely this is one of the ones which has helped me a lot, for sure.
I agree. If it's been around a long time or a lot of people are using it, there's usually a reason. You should at least look at it.
Exactly.
You may go in a
Exactly.
different direction, but
Exactly.
it's good to know
Exactly.
about it.
Exactly.
So, next question here. Can you tell me about a time in your career when you experienced what I call a strategic moment, an aha moment, where a strategic insight later empowered you to drive changes within the organization or to drive a change?
One of the things which I have kind of it's been core to the way that I've operated as an FP&A professional is to really believe in the power of processes and standardization, right?
Sure.
So I think my example of that aha moment would be when I was working a couple of years back, actually, when I was in the e-commerce space. I was part of this pretty lean kind of a team that was responsible for driving, financial planning, reporting, analysis for the holiday season, right? For this e-commerce company that I was working in. So when I say holiday season, you can think about a time period which is around mid of October to, let's say, Christmas, right? Which is like the peak season for any e-commerce company, right? Because that's the shopping season.
Of course,
And
yeah.
this was like
Q4.
exactly. And it was like, so this team, it was, when I was part of this team, it was an intense work stream because, we used to have executive reviews. And when I say executive reviews, like it was the GMs and the VPs and the SVPs that we had to present to almost 3 times a day, right? During that time frame of about 45 days, wherein we used to walk, the execs through, the business performance, both from a top line as well as from a variable expenses standpoint. And we had to come up with the forecast for the next couple of days or weeks, right, to be able to kind of give direction in terms of where are we heading towards, right, from a quarterly performance standpoint. And the insights, from that my team used to work on, like I could see how they're being used to kind of make decisions, right? Whether it be around marketing strategy, whether it be around deals and promos, whether it's around product sourcing, or where do we place the product on the website. So it was pretty critical to having like the insights from my team were pretty critical to having a successful holiday season. Now it might sound surprising, but for some of the days, like especially around those peak shopping days like Thanksgiving and Black Friday, I remember we used to have an exec stand up as early as 6:30 in the morning, right? Uh, and so when this entire process started, where I'm going with this is, for the first 2 or 3 days, we really struggled, to get the insights on time, in a format that is extremely exec friendly, but also something that delivered the insights to be able to make business decisions, right? And we tried a couple of things, but I think what really stuck and worked well for us for the remainder of the holiday season was aligning on a standard set of KPIs and reporting modules that looked at the different, cuts of the business that, the execs wanted to look at and we thought would provide value from. Uh, and we used that on a consistent basis to assess the business performance, right? So we almost automated that. And how that helped us is that it freed up a lot of time for us to actually work on ad hoc deep dive analyses on specific areas that needed that double click, right? Which we weren't able to get to because we were just like so consumed with creating these set of reports to be able to present to the exec team thrice a day, right? So once we kind of had this standardized framework, it provided a consistent framework to measure the performance on a continual basis. So one, we got the time to actually work on ad hoc analysis. Second, we got a consistent framework to kind of measure the performance on a continual basis. And it also led to, effective and fast, kind of decisions being made in the organization, right? So my learning, which I think was a strategic learning for me, was based on that experience, is if you establish a process and if you're able to drive standardization, it really works and is probably the most effective tool to drive effective decision making in an organization. And it's especially important, I think, for FP&A professionals since we are at the core of that planning and budgeting exercise, right? Since then, I've always encouraged my teams to, stay agile. I think that's really important as an FP&A team, but yet, drive processes and standardization where needed so that we are able to drive efficiency. So I think that's how I think about that. That's my strategic aha moment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And there's a lot to be said for driving standardization and efficiency to free up time and
Yep.
how you realized it, focusing on just those key metrics and really being diligent on those can allow you to dig in and find other trends. So I appreciate that answer. Sounds like a great experience, and you've carried that with you throughout your career. So we're coming up toward the end of our time. So we're going to do the get to know you section. It's a little bit of a kind of a lightning round, so to speak. I have actually 5 questions here for you. One's going to be a little bit of a surprise. So we'll put you on the spot for a second, but you get no more than 30 seconds to answer each of these.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started here. What is something interesting about you not many people know? Something we would generally not find online about you?
Okay. I think it would be my interest and liking for the Indian classical music. From a young age, I have been practicing tabla. So tabla is like the Indian version of the drums, basically.
Okay.
And
We'll
since
take your word for it.
and post COVID, when we started kind of having this hybrid work from home, work in person, kind of a hybrid environment. I actually started spending a lot of time getting back to Indian classical music, not just as a tabla player or the Indian version of drums player, but actually starting to learn singing, Indian classical music singing. And I'll confess, I'm a beginner, so I don't definitely want to be seen singing just as yet. In public audience, but it's a lot of fun, doing that outside of my work, and it's something almost nobody outside of my wife and my daughter know about, or maybe my parents. Yeah.
I appreciate sure. And I was just going to put you on the spot and ask you to sing a song, but we'll wait till your next time on FP&A. So keep practicing. When we have you back
Exactly.
on FP&A today, I
Exactly.
expect a song. So if you
Exactly.
could meet one person in the world, dead or alive, who are you going to meet?
Oh, it has to be Steve Jobs. I
Why?
mean, he's an inspiration for countless folks, around the world, including myself. Uh, and beyond just being like a profound technologist or an innovator, I think what I kind of draw inspiration from him is his passion to, I've seen a bunch of his videos on YouTube, right? And what you can see in that person is
Sure.
his relentless passion to understand consumer behavior and reflect that in the products that he creates. Like, there is a purpose. There is a great sense of understanding, and there is a great sense of purpose behind every product that Apple created, or Steve Jobs created, right? And it was based on his understanding of consumer behavior, consumer psychology. So his products were, not just like functional, but they were amazingly intuitive, right, to the customers. Um, so that he's an inspiration for me. So I would say definitely go with Steve Jobs on that question.
All right, thank you. So, next question. What is the last thing you Googled, looked up on YouTube, or used generative AI to answer about finance, kind of FP&A or Excel?
Uh, it's funny you asked that because yesterday evening, I was trying to kind of try learn something more about this one uh, methodology using which you can do comparative analysis on a questionnaire based data. I was like, how do I even begin to figure out what are the statistical techniques to use for this, right? And that's what I used, conversational or generative AI for, because I was like, and the best part about it is you can just ask them a random question saying, hey, I'm trying to do this. Uh, Tell me, like a statistical approach to be able to figure this out. And that's the last thing which I did. It's not funny, but it's the latest of what I
Sure.
used
Yep.
Gen AI or conversational AI for. Not Gen AI, but conversational AI for. So that would be it.
Appreciate it. What's your favorite Excel function or feature?
It has to be index match.
All right.
It's
I guess I'll give you that one. No, I'm just kidding.
it's index match. I think I've used it so much. Power user at Excel. So I really I've seen the power that index match has in a lot of what I've done, or a lot of dashboards, Excel based dashboards that I've created in the past. So
Sure.
that would be the one.
All right. And so here's the bonus question. Since you're at Adobe, what's your favorite Adobe product?
Adobe Express, the one that I currently support. That's an
Good
easy one.
answer.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
I thought you might say something else, but we'll give you that one. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here as we wrap up, we just have two questions left for you. So this question is, what do you see as the most critical skill for FP&A professionals today? What's the most important thing they need to have?
I think four skills which we've kind of talked about before. It's business acumen, skilled at technology, being able to be analytically strong, and then strong business partnering skills. So it's I think those four, if they have, I think they're set up and they have a strong foundation to being a successful FP&A professional.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know we talked a little bit about that before, so appreciate the four there. So, last question. If someone wants to reach out to you or get a hold of you after they listen to this episode, what's the best way to do that?
It would be, hitting me up on LinkedIn, because I'm fairly active on my LinkedIn, and you'll easily be able to find me with my first and last name on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to connect with me, that would be the best place to do that.
Well, I really appreciate you carving out some time today. I know you're very busy. I know you have a family and a job and all those things. So thank you for taking 45 minutes to chat here with us. And I look forward to releasing this here in the near future to our audience. So thanks for being on the show.
Perfect. It's been a great conversation, Paul. So thank you so much for the opportunity and being able to kind of share my thoughts with your listeners. So thank you. Really appreciate it.